Thank you, Rod. I don't know of a session that I've been to where you've been present when I haven't taken away at least 6 or 7 really important messages, and thank you so much for your contribution to healthy land and water. I'd ask my co-presenters to join me on the stage. My name's Paul Dolenchew. I work for Healthy Land and Water, and today we're going to give you a bit of a snapshot of some of the activities right across the region through our lens, through our project lens. All the things that we will mention are linked to the report card, to the future card, and to the SEQ NRM plan. This is going to be a little bit like a baton relay, so please bear with us. We've done lots of rehearsals. Like Julie before us, I too just want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land that we are meeting and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. What better place to start than with agriculture? South East Queensland produces 12% of Queensland's agricultural commodities. 60% of the region is classed as farmland, with grazing, cropping, horticulture, irrigated ag, forestry and turf as the main land uses. The region's ability to maintain its agricultural productivity and competitiveness is highly reliant on maintaining its natural resource assets. We all know this. Minimising nutrient losses, we've heard about that immediately, into waterways, and providing ecosystem services to the wider community. Out in our rural catchments, our sustainable ag team works and supports with landholders and farming communities to implement practices that improve resilience. We deliver tailored practical information on a range of topics, including, but not limited to, soil health, erosion control, pasture and grazing management, managing weeds and pests, fire, riparian management, on-farm vegetation, and property management planning across the region. On an annual basis, and I think these are conservative figures, we conduct up to 100 property visits to provide management advice and support on on-farm monitoring of land condition, soil health and native veg. Up to 25 workshops and field days. I know that's a conservative estimate. Over 40 property and or fire management plans, on-farm trials, demonstration sites, and a whole suite of comms material. This work collectively supports more than 480 landholders who manage more than 120,000 hectares of land. By doing so, we help maintain sustainable production, profitability and resilience in farming enterprises and rural communities across the region. How do we do this? So we do this by building on our extension approaches, by our capacity building work and practice change programs, and most importantly, maintaining those really critical relationships with local landholders, community and industry groups, and government agencies. It's this approach that enables us to deal with the key threats of soil erosion, acidification, soil carbon decline, and loss of native veg, all of which, as we said before, are priority regional targets in the SEQ regional NRM plan and also in local catchment action plans. One of the examples of our successful programs is our Drought Resilience Program, which is designed to support landholders to better prepare for droughts and for a changing climate. As we all know, drought affects the productivity, profitability and well-being of the communities who rely on the rural sector, as well as significantly impacting on our environment. This program builds the capacity of landholders to manage drought and the impacts of a highly variable climate through improved planning, decision-making and the adoption of strategies and practices that can actually build resilience on farm. Another really interesting and highly effective ag project is our work with polymers. On the Sunshine Coast, a group of farmers have been trialling a method of controlling soil erosion and associated runoff of nutrients and pesticides using a commercially available biodegradable polymer product that has proven successful in the construction industry. The polymer is sprayed on crops, in this case pineapples and strawberries, to hold the beds in place after they've been formed and planted. This lowers erosion, seals in the herbicide, stops runoff of sediment and chemicals into waterways, including the passage in Moreton Bay. Over the past 6 years, local growers have experienced significant time and money savings as a result of using this method. Another key component of our sustainable ag work are our regional agriculture land care facilitators, otherwise known as RALFs. They provide a really important central point in contact for farmers, industry and community groups on emerging ideas, land management practices, policies and opportunities to help improve the sustainability, productivity and profitability of ag in our region. And we have one of those in the room today. Our RALF facilitators share their incredibly amazing knowledge and expertise. They provide workshops and field days. They are incredibly good at establishing partnerships and working with local industry, land care and community groups, and delivering a huge suite of ag projects right across the region. So let me let others follow on. Mark.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of our mid-Brisbane programs. We have, you can't see it in this photograph obviously, but approximately 40% of the drinking water supply for southeast Queensland is either sourced from or travels through the mid-Brisbane catchment before being treated at the Mount Crosby water treatment plant. Many of you are pretty familiar with that process. As part of our mid-Brisbane partnerships program, which we've been running with Seqwater for a little over 4 years, we're working very closely with landholders through the mid-Brisbane to revegetate riverbanks, install fencing, control weeds and stabilise gullies. This work makes those gully systems and riverbanks much more resilient to high flow events, reducing erosion and the flow of sediment out to Moreton Bay. Stage 1 of this program involved 24 projects aimed at controlling active erosion over a combined 1.2 kilometres of gully systems and riverbanks. 13 erosion control structures including log jams, pile fields, rock chutes and leaky weirs have been constructed as a part of this. The resilience of riverbanks and gully systems has been increased through the establishment of an extra 16,000 plants. Stage 2 of this program is currently being delivered and is focused on areas of high risk due to slope, soil type, vegetation cover and proximity to the Mount Crosby and Lowood water treatment plants. We all know this, but large-scale investment is required to bring back and protect streambank vegetation and restore the resilience across the region, but particularly in our western catchments. Much work's been done, but there's still a lot for us left to do. Bringing back streambank vegetation by just 6,000 kilometres over southeast Queensland would restore the resilience to many freshwater streams and reduce sediment loads to coastal areas by approximately 50%. The Healthy Catchments program has been tackling erosion for over 10 years in targeted catchments of southeast Queensland. It's delivering gully and streambank stabilisation projects to control erosion and improve water quality by reducing sediment and turbidity in waterways. These projects include small-scale gully repairs through to large-scale in-stream engineering works, as well as working with landholders to identify erosion risks and implement low-cost solutions. In the last 18 months alone, this program has successfully stabilised over 3.8 kilometres of riverbanks and gully systems with earthworks and revegetation. From this work, our recent assessments estimate between 10 and 12,000 tonnes of sediment have been prevented from entering our waterways each year. I'm going to hand over to Ross.
Thanks, Mark. Offsets feature as a growth strategy for the business development and growth team. Environmental offsets in the broader sense have been part of Healthy Land and Water's portfolio of work for a long time. So establishing koala habitat and installing environmentally friendly moorings to increase the extent of seagrass in the catchment have featured prominently in our work. More recently, with the pilot trials on the Logan River and the release of the point source water quality policy in 2019, our focus has changed. We've seen an increased interest from our team and our partners in remediating riparian areas, identifying sites in need of riparian improvement, monitoring the integrity of sites that have been installed, and exploring new opportunities identified in the policy, such as reinstating wetlands. Our efforts are guided by science. Rod and Mark have just talked about the importance of sediment control in our catchments and the effects it might have downstream. Radionuclide testing of cores in Moreton Bay identified several subcatchments in the Greater Brisbane River catchment disproportionately providing an increased amount of sediment relative to other catchments in the broader Brisbane catchment. So these catchments have been the focus of programs such as the Healthy Catchments program, but also of alternative investment sources, including the Stormwater Offsets Policy and the Point Source Water Quality Policy. So working with partners, including Urban Utilities, Port of Brisbane, Unity Water, Department of Environment and Science, local government associations, and in conjunction with landholders, subcontractors and traditional owners, a huge quantity of sediment has been prevented from detrimentally affecting downstream water quality. The Ladley Creek subcatchment is one of these focal areas. Subsequent to the destabling effects of the 2011 and 2013 flood events, a master plan was developed for a section of Ladley Creek. Since that time, 4 kilometres of works have been installed. Those works include bed control structures, cross-channel roughness structures and cross-floodplain roughness structures through pile fields, bank reprofiling and revegetation. These works have saved 22,000 tonnes of sediment from entering that stream each and every year since implementation. Overall, in the past 8 years, the Environmental Offsets team has focused on repair and remediation. We've looked at catchments including Ladley, the Logan and Caboolture, and combined we've saved 44,000 tonnes of sediment, 24 tonnes of nitrogen and 40 tonnes of phosphorus from entering waterways each year since implementation. Associated with that, we've planted 12,000 riparian trees and shrubs. So we're really looking forward to the next 2 years where we have a similar quantum of work in front of us as we've had over the last 8 years. So if you know of any competent engineers interested in applying novel solutions to real-world problems, please let me know. Thank you. Thanks, Rach.
Thanks, Ross. Hi, everyone. For the last 4 years, Healthy Land and Water has had the privilege and the pride to now be home of the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium. The consortium was established in 1998 and over its very active life has upskilled over 12,700 people at its workshops, training, field days, forums, conferences, delivering publications, submissions and advice. The consortium has channeled investment of over $10 million into fire preparedness and community resilience of both our landscapes and the communities who rely on them. The Black Summer bushfires of 2019-2020 were a national catastrophic event which cost the lives of 33 Australians directly, destroyed over 3,000 homes, burnt over 18.7 million hectares of land. These fires contributed millions of tonnes of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And they were a watershed moment for all of us and many communities across Australia. They had significant impacts to people and wildlife here in southeast Queensland. To help impacted communities recover, the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium has been working together with fire-affected communities in the Noosa catchment and the Carneys Creek and Rosevale Terome areas in the Scenic Rim catchments, delivering our sub-catchment fire management planning model. This model works together with local communities using a tenure-blind landscape scale approach to fire management. Landholders design and construct their own property-based fire management plans and discuss proposed on-ground wildfire mitigation works at community fire information nights. Together with other agencies and local governments, communities can plan their fire management and mitigation actions together around the table, delivering a common understanding and vision of fire management within local landscapes. Paul?
and in no particular order, we'll keep going. As well as the fantastic work of the consortium, we're actually responding to these fire events on the ground as well. So many of you know that during the 2019 bushfire season, fire burned into rainforest communities, creating tree fall, damaging canopies, and allowing lots of exotic species to take hold. While working closely with park rangers and local landholders, we have focused our restoration effort on critically endangered lowland subtropical rainforests by removing weeds and facilitating natural regen. By documenting and identifying what species were regenerating post-fire, Healthy Land and Water scientists actually made a really interesting discovery, that rainforest plants are actually more resilient than we previously thought to these events. In fact, most of the ones that we actually observed came back and resprouted post-fire. And this gives us hope that such communities in the future will be able to withstand these events. Similar restoration efforts are occurring in other listed ecological communities, including littoral rainforest, salt marsh, and coastal swamp oak. Healthy Land and Water is also an active participant in the recovery of many of South East Queensland's really unique threatened species. Post-fire, we're also working on practical actions to recover the spotted-tailed quoll, greater gliders, the grey-headed flying fox, and the eastern bristlebird. Working with one of our trusted partners, our survey effort recorded the first ever record of the endangered pink underwing moth in Lamington National Park. Later on, Shannon will discuss how Healthy Land and Water is investing over $1 million to restore land roosts and protect feeding habitat for over 20 species of migratory shorebirds. In addition, for years now, we have also supported the recovery of wild macadamia populations in southeast Queensland. And we continue to work with environmental groups to document new populations of rare species, such as endangered dwarf crayfish, and I think Julie's favourite tree, the critically endangered almost bottle tree.
So complementing a lot of the erosion work that's done through Mark and Paul's projects and Ross's projects, we are also currently working on one of the most extensive invasive weed management projects undertaken in southeast Queensland through the removal of weeds along creeks and rivers in the region, and specifically in areas above the SEQ water offtakes. At the conclusion of year 3 of the program, which would have been in June, 148 kilometres of creek bank have been managed for Cat's Claw Creek creeper, and management would have been physical management of both primary and secondary cut down of the weed. This effort has been supported with the release of 300,000 biocontrol agents, specifically the jewel beetle, at 45 sites across the region, and those sites are next to where we've been working and help to protect those areas. Foreign weeds are rapidly destroying southeast Queensland's precious ecosystems and continue to thrive in our environment due to the lack of natural predators and their ability to outcompete native flora for resources such as space, nutrient and water. Infestations of invasive vine weeds specifically along riverbanks and in rainforest have devastating effects on our region, as they have the ability to overgrow and kill mature trees. This results in mass erosion when tree fall results. This creates sediment, reducing water quality, reduces fish stock numbers, and results in the loss of vital habitat. The project is preserving water quality in the water catchments that provide cities and towns with drinking water, improving the condition of the region's riverbanks to protect biodiversity and preventing sediment entering the Moreton Bay. The land restoration team is also focused on species conservation. Our work is not only delivering outcomes for people, but our region's animals as well, specifically the koala. Paul? Australia's koala population have dramatically decreased since European arrival, with koalas now vulnerable to extinction. In southeast Queensland, koala populations are at elevated risk for various reasons. A growing human population has led to large-scale clearing of better quality habitats, with many koalas now struggling within smaller, fragmented patches of poor quality forest. This, combined with a decline in habitat conditions through drought, fire and climate change and disease, vehicle strike, dog attack and reduced genetic diversity have culminated in causing substantial decline in the koala population. To date, our project is looking at increasing koala habitat and biodiversity within what is called koala arcs over an area of 450 hectares. The initial focus was on Flinders Peak area south of Ipswich with a $1 million investment. In 2021, an additional $2 million was announced for the project, expanding our protection efforts into 3 additional arcs, they being near Lake Manchester, North Pine, and in the Grantchester areas. Rach, back to you.
Thanks, Dennis. Water by Design. So our Water by Design program has been running now for 15 years in southeast Queensland, and about just over a decade of that also up in the Reef regions. I just want to acknowledge that the inception of that program came from many of the members in this room through the Healthy Waterways program many years ago. The program is one that's delivering capacity building for urban water management, so with a very strong focus on erosion sediment control and stormwater management. Particularly, the state program is delivered in partnership with the Department of Environment and Science, and we deliver training, field days, capacity building, workshops, demonstration sites, guidelines, and a whole range of online resources with councils right across the east coast of Queensland. We know that here in Moreton Bay, sediment runoff from urban construction sites is a major source of pollution and potentially one of the greatest contemporary risks to the environmental health and economic productivity of the Bay. We also know that sustained and consistent ESC compliance and enforcement activities have been shown to result in high levels of effective on-site erosion and sediment control performance within the land development industry, capable of achieving sediment load reductions of about 60 to 80%. The Water by Design program has been championed, as I said, by local governments here in southeast Queensland and in the Reef regions. It's strategically led by highly skilled and knowledgeable steering committee members from all SEQ local governments, and they really provide the direction for the program, and I want to thank them today for their ongoing support. Our Water by Design portal is an online portal. It holds decision support tools, case studies and frameworks. It includes our suite of best practice guidelines, which have been adopted as the industry standard by councils right across southeast Queensland and the Reef regions. The guidelines promote and enable integrated land use and infrastructure planning in delivering economic, social and environmental benefits for Queensland, and they're critical tools in supporting delivery of the aims and purpose of the state planning policy. What am I on, Suze? Thank you. So travelling out towards Moreton Bay through the region's creeks, rivers and wetlands, the collective impact of our work can be seen. The Healthy Land and Water Cleanup Program is another long-running program that Healthy Land and Water has been delivering for about 22 years now. It collects floating and bank-bound litter from waterways across southeast Queensland. Again, this is a member-supported program. All 3 tiers of government, so local government, state government and federal government support this program. We know that southeast Queensland waterways are estimated to deliver over $10 billion a year to the region's economy through recreation, drinking water supply, tourism and fishing. Despite this, we know that marine debris and waterway litter is still considered to be a significant threat facing particularly our oceans, coastal areas and beaches throughout the world, but also here in southeast Queensland. This year, the program removed about 16 tonnes of mainly lightweight plastics from the catchments that we service in southeast Queensland. Importantly, the program collects data for every single cleanup event that we undertake. So we have a really rich data set over 2 decades of litter types, numbers and locations, and we utilise that data to inform source reduction initiatives. So, for example, the cleanup program data set and collectively data collected by the community here in southeast Queensland was integral in driving policy changes which support the reduction of specific waste streams. So you would know that a couple of years ago there was the introduction of the plastic bag ban and the container deposit legislation. Since the introduction of those policy changes, we have seen significant declines in those litter streams in southeast Queensland waterways. Through our recent work with the federal government cleaning up Breakfast Creek, we've been able to provide data evidence of the pervasiveness of polystyrene. So together with other cleanup groups, this data helped to support the case for national legislation, which was announced, you might remember, by Environment Minister Susan Ley and Assistant Environment Minister Trevor Evans, and that will see a national ban on polystyrene packaging go into effect in 2022. And we would expect to see significant declines in polystyrene once that policy change goes into effect. Living shorelines. So we know that coastal habitats provide ecologically and economically important ecosystem services. They protect shorelines, they cycle nutrients, support fisheries and promote recreation and tourism. They also sequester carbon and they're a significant source of biodiversity. Living shorelines is a term that was first coined in the late 1970s to describe the use of soft or green infrastructure such as habitat restoration and living systems to provide coastal protection services. Healthy Land and Water, together with our partners, deploy a range of living shoreline projects. So using environmental engineering and a natural solutions approach to coastal shoreline management, we aim to protect shorelines from erosion while preserving, enhancing and creating coastal habitat. So the Ransom Road Reserve Restoration borders the Moreton Bay Ramsar wetland. This reserve consists of a salt marsh understory with a Melaleuca and Casuarina open forest canopy. The ecosystem is listed as vulnerable under the EPBC Act, and some forested areas at the site are also supporting koala habitat. Unfortunately, like many of these systems, weeds have invaded the site and are smothering the salt marsh. So revegetation and weed control are being undertaken across 5 hectares to protect those salt marsh and woodland areas at the reserve. The project will see up to 300 native species planted at the site and is a significant example of the enhancement of the values of Moreton Bay's Ramsar wetlands. The Hayes Inlet Weed Control project sees us removing weeds to enable natural regeneration of the salt marsh and Casuarina and Melaleuca wetlands at Hayes Inlet. Hayes Inlet is a designated green zone in the Moreton Bay Marine Park, a declared fish habitat area and part of the Ramsar wetland. Sadly, mid-story weed species infest the woodland areas and they suppress growth of the salt marsh understory. Salt marshes, as you all know, are important intertidal wetland plant communities. They're made up of succulents, grasses, low shrubs and salt pans that experience periodic or occasional tidal flooding. Salt marsh communities are key components of the landscape and protect from storm surge, filter nutrients and sediments before they make their way to Moreton Bay and contribute to the productivity of fisheries. I think I'm handing over to someone. Thank you.
Now, Living Shoreways lead us back to Moreton Bay and some of the really amazing other projects that we're doing in that space. One of these is debris removal. So while we always try to stop litter at its source, we have removed, in fact, over 60 tonnes of marine debris from the bay across 150 hectares, helping to protect and preserve threatened coastal and marine ecosystems throughout this Ramsar-listed wetland. In the south of the bay is little-known Curlew Island. Now, while it's possibly not the same as the Port of Brisbane site, the island and its associated banks provide the most southern shorebird roosting and feeding habitats in Queensland. Our restoration work on the island is improving the integrity of that space by removing weeds and regenerating with native species. The work can be challenging, especially when you're carting 14,000 litres of water to get to 3,500 plants. But the reward is knowing that we have helped stabilise and protect shorebird populations in this southern part of the bay, where thousands of these long-distance travellers visit every year to feed and to rest. Also on the Gold Coast, you'll find the Coomba Lakelands, an integral component of the Moreton Bay Ramsar wetland. Like Curlew Island, our project there represents another important opportunity to restore habitat, improve ecosystem health, and again protect roosting sites for these amazing shorebirds. Moving north, we're doing some fascinating work on Coochie Mudlow Island. The large Melaleuca wetland on the island is home to over 170 native plant species, including the endangered giant swamp orchid, and it provides habitat for many birds and animals, including the threatened Wallam sedge frog. Restoring wetlands like this is important because they provide clean water, they protect our shores, they reduce the impact of floods, and they improve water quality. Further north still, our Shellfish Reef project is restoring shellfish habitats, enhancing fish stocks and marine diversity, and improving water quality in the Pumice-Stone Passage. Up until the turn of the last century, Moreton Bay supported magnificent intertidal shellfish beds, which had always been a valuable food and cultural resource for traditional owners. Overharvesting, disease, water pollution depleted these stocks to the point where they are now functionally extinct in the passage. Recent monitoring of these new shellfish reefs reveal that fish assemblages are 4 times more diverse, a 10-fold increase in total fish abundance, a 16-fold increase in harvestable fish abundance, and critically, the installations of these reefs have increased the overall carrying capacity of the lower Pumice-Stone. That is, the reefs are not just acting as a fish attracting device, but they're actively improving ecological function. Shannon.
Out in the bay, Quandamooka country, and we heard from Shannon Rusker, those fringing nations, north, west and south. More recently, we've been assessing migratory shorebirds across the coastal southeast Queensland, including the Moreton Bay Ramsar that we heard just recently. We're updating known habitat and we're determining site-specific management actions that are required. With research by the University of Queensland and monitoring from the Queensland Way to Study group who are here today, shows that migratory shorebirds and their habitats are unfortunately in decline in Moreton Bay. Migratory shorebirds, like the critically endangered Far Eastern curlew, have experienced population decline of more than 80% of their known habitat over the past 30 years. And we know that there are hundreds of sites across Moreton Bay, north and south, supporting shorebirds. Our project will look at to implement strategies and actions to conserve roosting and feeding sites used by Moreton Bay migratory shorebirds. Priority actions are also being implemented in partnership with land managers to enhance shorebird habitat and reduce immediate and long-term threats to habitat quality and extent. Reducing the disturbance of feeding and resting migratory shorebirds by people visiting and working in and around Moreton Bay is critical and will require behaviour change, educational campaigns, incentives, and maybe improvements to our regulation. We're also working on pig control programs that will enable the Quandamooka Ulubarabi Aboriginal Corporation, KAYAK, as they're known, to lead pig control activities on Mulgumpen, Moreton Island, while considering cultural landscapes, their values and traditional owner aspirations for country. Invasive animal and plant species have had a significant impact on our Australian environment, damaging landscapes and suppressing native species with widespread negative economic and cultural consequences. Due to the disturbance of these landscapes, but I guess the disconnectedness from the islands to the mainland, we are hoping that we can really eradicate pigs on Mulgumpin and hopefully reduce their disturbance. We heard about the environmentally friendly mooring program as an offset mechanism. Seagrass meadows, as we've heard from Rod, are one of the most important marine habitats globally, and we have brought seagrass meadows back to Moreton Bay, which I guess is something to celebrate. The Moreton Bay, or the Quandamooka complex, provides essential nursery habitat for juvenile fish, crustaceans, which we've heard supports our commercial, our recreational fisheries, as well as that rich marine biodiversity. In Quandamooka, Moreton Bay, there are 7 species of seagrass species that form important habitat for many marine species and are a key food source for dugong and green turtle. Seagrass meadows face a number of threats, including sediment runoff, algal blooms, lyngbia, and damage from traditional block and tackle moorings. The EFM program was developed to protect those seagrass meadows and the associated marine habitats at sea floor by replacing the traditional block and tackle moorings with an environmentally friendly alternative. Block and tackle moorings, which often consist of makeshift anchors like concrete blocks, or in some cases train wheels, which we have seen when we have snorkeled down to the seafloor, are attached to a chain and are highly damaging to seagrass meadows and that seafloor. As the tide moves in and out, the mooring chain drags across the seagrass, ripping it up and creating crop circles, as we can see on the screen, or halos. These are often regarded as habitat dead zones that can be seen very clearly in that aerial imagery. The amount of disturbance varies with the length of the mooring chain and can be up to 1,400 square metres per vessel in Moreton Bay. So the environmentally friendly moorings cause less damage to the seagrass bed by ensuring there is a minimal contact with the seafloor while still safely securing vessels under those extreme conditions that sometimes we experience in the bay. Healthy Land and Water has been replacing the traditional block and tackle mooring with the EFM alternative in Queensland for over 10 years now. The program is being delivered in partnership with Department of Environment and Science, Marine Parks, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Quandamooka Ulubarabi Aboriginal Corporation and the Queensland Recreational Boating Council.
Thanks, Shannon. And I think one of the things that we've been really fortunate with at Healthy Land and Water as an organisation over the last 20 years and hearing all those activities is continuing to grow in our understanding of the landscapes that we've inherited, particularly from First Nations. So we're in a region that has been managed by First Nations people for tens of thousands of years, and all of those activities that have been highlighted, increasingly it's not just the knowledge of First Nations but also the leadership of First Nations which is enabling these activities to be progressed and to be delivered in a way which is more holistic and more comprehensive than ever before. So if you think about the different activities that you've heard about today, when it comes to that shellfish reef restoration up on the Pumicestone Passage, Susie is out there talking specifically with traditional owners and obtaining their cultural values, getting their input and buy-in and their permission, their leadership and permission to deliver that activity and that restoration for the betterment of Pumicestone Passage and for all of us as a community. Equally, on Bribie Island, we've seen, and also on Minjerribah, we see cypress forests. And these cypress forests, we've come to realise, particularly in the last 10 years, that these ecosystems contain trees which have been aged by the Queensland Herbarium to be over 1,000 years of age. And through traditional knowledge gathering, supported by archaeologists, these values are now being incorporated within national park management plans, and these trees are providing information that enables our fire management programs to be designed in a way which respects those past management practices that were enacted before European settlement. So when we have these disastrous fire events, say the 2019 fire events, and that impacted several areas, these values are being recognised by emergency services, and we have 737 aircraft and water bombing aircraft going and protecting cultural sites and landscapes in a way through traditional owner-led approaches that have never happened before. This is groundbreaking stuff and isn't happening elsewhere in the country. We can be proud here in southeast Queensland of having traditional owners leading and being supported by government, by community and by Healthy Land and Water. And increasingly, traditional owners are empowering us through an organisation such as the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium to educate the community on these principles and these values. And once again, that's having benefits for all of us. On Minjerribah, the enablement of First Nations management of country through collaboration between Healthy Land and Water and stakeholders, we've seen the protected area on that island go from 2% of that island in 2010 to now 50% of that island is a protected area. We're talking about the second largest sand island on this globe. And there is a state government commitment. You can jump online and see that that is expected to grow to 80% of that island in the near future. And once again, that couldn't have happened without that First Nations leadership. I think for us, increasingly, as an organisation and as a community in southeast Queensland, understanding of culture and empowering the protection of culture, it's a journey that we're all going on. We see from Rio Tinto and the Juukan Gorge example and what happened in Western Australia recently in a review of cultural heritage around the country. As a community, we're driving the protection in partnership with First Nations of cultural values that are part of a living culture in this region that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. We have the oldest living culture on this earth here in southeast Queensland, and it's something that we can all be enormously proud of, and that is informing our reconciliation journey at Healthy Land and Water. It's a lifelong journey, and we hope to work with all of the community on that journey, but it's also supporting empowered futures. We're here today in 2021. With the last 200 years, there's been an enormous suppression of this oldest living culture on earth. But we are all part of not only just restoring country, but supporting empowered futures. We've been fortunate through all of our work to see young traditional owners be able to be provided opportunities to participate in on-ground activities that have protected their culture, provided employment opportunities, and provide them with a prosperous future for their family and their community. And they are now in environments in this region where they can look up to their leaders who are being respected, and them as individuals are providing leadership roles in the community and being able to protect and look after country. So it's an enormous privilege, and I think it's one of the elements of our work at Healthy Land and Water we can be most proud of. Thank you. Andrew.
Wow, what a team. Thanks, Joel, for stirring words, and thanks to the team. So these are the guys who work for all of us, for all of you on behalf of the region. And I'd just like to give a shout out to Shannon, Ross, Paul, Rachel, Dennis, Mark, and Joel, who are leaders in our organisation, but also leaders for all of you. So, because they've done what they wanted to do, which was to get the job done quickly, we've got a bit of extra time for questions, which is really good, because I was a bit worried it was a bit too short. So now is a bit of question and answer time. So what I'll ask is, we've got some beautiful people over here who are going to have roving mics. We've got the amazing Corey Davis, welcome Corey, and the fantastic Sam Lloyd. And they will be walking around with the mic. So what I'd like you to do is, if you've got a question, stick your hand up. I've got some questions. The team won't really like my questions because I know the ins and outs of all the projects, and that I'll make them squirm a little. But if you've got a question, please stick your hand up. Say where you're from. If you know, and we're happy to say the First Nations country that you're from is too, that'd be absolutely wonderful. Say your name, where you're from, and give us a question. Probably not a big, long statement. Just a question that one of the team would be really glad to answer. So please stick your hands up and ask a question. Margie's got a question right out of the gate.
Hi, I'm Margie Milgate, SEQ Catchments Members Association. I just was interested to pick up the fact that the nitrogen is increasing out in the bay, and we're doing a whole lot of different activities, and great work, guys. That was just awesome to hear all those wonderful things. What is the source of these nitrogen increases that we're seeing, and which part of our programs can we keep on tweaking or moving on to try and reduce that nitrogen load?
Thanks, Margie. Good question. I guess it is those catchment sources, and that includes the point sources, the sewage treatment plants, the land uses. So yeah, it's hard to pinpoint where the nitrogen is coming from. I think recent research that's just come out says 40% is coming from our STPs around the world. Whether that's the case in SEQ, but it's that other 60 to 80% that's land-based. And that's the challenge for integrated catchment management.
Hi. Am I on? Yeah, hi, I'm John Oxenford from Bribie Island. And this is a question around fire management practices. Bribie Island's a bit of a dog's breakfast in terms of ownership, some freeholds, some council-owned lands, some state lands administered by council, some state lands administered by the state government. Now, we've seen some changes, as I understand it, in MBRC's fire management practices, and we don't see too many late season burns from them, in keeping with the idea of First Nations type fire management. But I don't see that happening with our state government lands. Can you give us some insights as to why we're still seeing late season burns of some very, very severe nature that's causing significant secondary damage when those burns are undertaken? Do we see any movement? Are we likely to see some change to a more traditional fire management practice in the state government-owned lands on Bribie?
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this panel who can talk about that, and we've also got Sam Lloyd there who's knowledgeable. Where should I start, Sam? Who'd like to jump off of that? Paul, do you want to start? And then we can... There's three panelists that can talk about that, no problem.
Thanks for the question, John. So some of the current work that we're involved with on Bribie is about re-looking at how fire is managed on the island, particularly through a cultural heritage lens. It didn't start that way. To be honest, it started at looking at some of the main ecosystem types there and how they were being perhaps not so well managed in terms of their retention and the sort of whipstick regeneration that was occurring as a result of some of the wildfires in that space. But that has been completely revised to look at it through a cultural heritage lens, and I guess to be part of a co-management approach to looking at the island. So in doing that, yes, we are trying to move towards much more traditional based mechanisms of managing fire, but we've got a long way to go in that regard. Shannon, Joel, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex, like you could have a full day session about traditional burning practices and incorporating cultural values and informing that. But the critical thing to be aware of is that in a landscape like Bribie Island, in 2021, we're in a landscape where traditional fire management practices have been suppressed for most of the last 100 years, significantly in the last 50. And as a result, the ecosystem structure, if you have a look at any aerial imagery from Bribie Island or these sand islands and most of southeast Queensland, if you look at aerial imagery from the 50s and earlier, you'll look at vegetation structures that are vastly different. In the majority, they're much more open vegetation structures, and they are formed as a result of the suppression of dense regrowth. Traditional owners actively modified and undertook a range of vegetation management practices. Now, that 50 years where that hasn't been in place, what you've got is this vast thickening of many areas in the landscape, or a change, a complete shift in ecosystem structure and ecotones, which means today, those same fire landscapes or those same vegetation structures, if you apply the cultural practice that would have been applied 100 years ago, it doesn't work. And that's because the flammability of the landscape has changed and the vegetation ecosystem has completely changed. So to get back to that, it's not immediately about restoring the practice. It's actually about planning and designing a whole range of works that, one, recognises that history and also sets forward an aspired future in terms of what a cultural landscape looks like, and then collaboratively working to instigate that. And that will be some cultural practices, but it will probably also be heavy machinery, fire breaks and other mechanisms using contemporary fire management practices so that more of those cultural practices can be re-engaged.
I'm just going to ask also from one of our roving mic holders, Sam Lloyd, who's one of the best fire ecologists in Australia, in my opinion, anyway.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you for that question, John. I think what you've raised there is Bribie is a particularly complex landscape there in terms of tenure, but just to support what Joel and Paul have just said, what we're trying to do at the consortium is work with all the stakeholders to build this cross-tenure approach to fire management, which of course is about supporting in every way that we can the re-establishment of cultural burning practices, and seeing that become more and more of a priority for land managers is really fantastic for us, because that's of course what we seek to do. But as Joel said, it's a journey. But part of that, a really important part of that, is bringing people together to have this cross-tenure planning. Because the fire doesn't stop at a boundary, so we need to bring people together, appreciate that there's different zoning for those different land managers, there's different priorities, there's different complexities. So what we're trying to do is bring people together and encourage that cross-tenure planning approach between local government, state government agencies and QFES, remembering that QFES are not a land manager either. So to bring them into the picture, they don't have that ownership over the land. They come as a response agency, so we're bringing them in as a planning agency. So there's quite a lot of things at play there, but I think the take-home message is that what you've raised is a really good point, but everybody is, I just see it more and more, this willingness and eagerness to work with First Nations. It's not good enough to provide excuses anymore. So I think we are seeing that change. Just also to keep in mind that the changes in climate change of course, are changing. It doesn't mean that the window for prescribed burning has shrunk, it just means it's shifted. And people, that's a cultural change as well. So we're trying to build that reading of the landscape and being prepared to put fire into the landscape when it's ready, rather than as dictated by this history of burning. But in a Western sense, that is, of course. So thank you, John. I've got a question here already.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sorry to monopolise things. I'm from Bribie Island Environmental Protection Association as well. This wasn't planned. I was just wondering if the panel could give me an idea of what impact you might expect that the potential prospective dredging of the Caboolture River and the disturbance of up to 500,000 cubic metres of acid sulphate soils for the North Harbour development could have on the water quality in Palmerston Passage and in the wider bay.
Ooh. Ooh. I've got a feeling no one wants to touch that one.
It's a very brave Shannon.
Yeah, again, I guess it is a good question, and there's potential there to, I guess, influence those flows. And we just heard how Deception Bay has recovered with seagrass. I guess they're the sort of considerations that need to be considered when we disturb acid sulphate soils. What's the downstream effect to fish, seagrass meadows? And then I guess with the currents, are they heading north up into the passage on Bribie? So, yeah. So I'm hoping that some of those investigations have occurred in such an activity. But certainly, yeah, I guess our regional monitoring program can help maybe pick up what's happening post that activity, unfortunately. And I guess that's the challenge we face with our current report card and where we're heading is those lagging and leading indicators. So our lagging indicators are picking up on what's happened to that ecosystem, where do we need to be heading, and what could that activity, how will that impact on those downstream ecosystems?
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. There's another question from the floor. Oh, there's a couple more. We've got time for a few more questions. So sorry. First, the one at the back. Please go ahead. Yeah, that's you.
Okay,
go
me?
ahead.
Hi. Laurie Deacon. I'm from Norman Creek Catchment and Bullabur Creek Catchment and a few other things, the Sunshine Coast. So I suppose my question is around the business growth and development sections you talked about, and is it getting easier to convince, or are the incentives getting sort of more useful to convince businesses and development to use your guidelines, or to keeping with the Healthy Waterways plan? Is it getting easier? Are the incentives more useful, or is it still a bit of a struggle or more? Yeah.
Give Rach a crack at that one. Yep.
I'll just quickly say something. Thank you for that question. It's a great one, and I think we are starting to see a definite turn in business interest in natural assets and the natural environment, particularly with corporate social responsibility, now being at a board level and a board reporting level. So across the suite of programs that Healthy Land and Water deliver, we are certainly getting an increased amount of interest from business around how they could be authentically involved in our programs. So we're not interested in greenwash. We are delivering real outcomes for the region, and that's something that we're very forthright about. Ross, did you want to add to?
Yeah, I guess if you're referring directly to the point source water quality policy, that's much more open now. Since the draft was released in 2017, it's the actual policy in 2019. There's more avenues to pursue. There's probably still some ironing out of the best way to do that. There's certainly interest from utilities and point source polluters in using that, especially as they reach the limit of efficiency in their treatment plants, and it's getting more and more costly to get more nitrogen out at the point source. So there's definitely more interest in using it and applying it. And, you know, we are doing that more now when our workload has increased as a response. But yeah, there's still a long way, I think, to go to improve it and make it more accessible and readily usable by various entities. Yeah.
Thanks, Ross. We've got time, depending on how long the questions are, we've got time for one or two more questions. So the first one here and maybe one more.
So I've got a very simple question compared to the previous questions. The increase in Tim Rowe, Moreton Bay Environmental Ed Centre, the increase in nitrogen in the bay, is anyone looking at the possible inputs from Trichodesmium and Lyngbia outbreaks as a nitrogen source? I thought it was an easy question.
Yeah. Yeah, ask Michelle. Where's Michelle?
It is probably a good one to pass this to Michelle, who's our Lyngbia expert.
Coming off, look out. Scientist on the loose. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michelle Burford from Griffith Uni. I work on algae, so it's a very relevant question to me. So the question was about whether some types of algae, Trichodesmium and Lyngbia, are contributing a significant amount of nitrogen into the bay and whether they're one of the key causes of this increase in nitrogen. There just isn't enough biomass of Lyngbia and Trichodesmium to actually be making such a major contribution. The way they do it is they take nitrogen from the atmosphere and they bring it into the plants, and then that gets circled around in the aquatic systems. But there just isn't enough of the biomass. Although they can be a localised problem at times, there's not enough biomass to be able to drive those major changes in nitrogen that we're seeing in the bay. So we really have to look to ourselves and what we're doing. And it's probably things like more people coming to the area. I think that's an obvious one that was highlighted earlier that needs to be given some more consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Round of applause.
Yeah. How lucky are we? And I just want to also just acknowledge we've got 4 or 5 of our esteemed science panel here in the room today. So if you've got specific questions, and obviously Rod is the chair, but we're very lucky to have them in the room. So thanks for coming, Tony, Michelle, Sam Capon sitting over there. Joe Burton was here before. We're very, very lucky to have, and Hugh, of course. Where's Hugh? G'day, Hugh. I saw you here before. I wasn't sure if you were still in the room, but we're very fortunate. So we do have time for just one more question, and there was that one question over there. Please ask away.
Jeff Ravage from Moreton Bay Council, Regional Council.
Thanks, Rod.
I was just going to ask about platypus. How are the platypus going? Do we know, as a really good indicator of waterway health, how are the platypus populations in the region?
Yeah, that's right. I could talk about lungfish. Yeah, thanks for your question. Some of my colleagues might be closer to this data than I am, but I have seen some data through the mid-Brisbane and sections of the Western catchments which highlight some healthy platypus populations through there. There might be other people who are closer to the coastal data or northern reaches than I am. Maybe.
I guess my experience, certainly working with the Gold Coast groups, is that through Platypus Watch, is that there is quite a few, there's a good-sized population on the GC, although in recent years we've seen some disappearances in some parts, in some tributaries. So yeah, it's a mixed bag.
So I can't remember the research institution, but there has been, in the last few years, extensive eDNA work done for platypus populations. I know the Wildlife Preservation Society of Queensland was actively involved in that. The majority of this region's waterways, including places like Petrie Creek right in the middle of Nambour, a lot of the waterways within cane fields, etc., do have platypus populations. They're actually surprisingly resilient when it comes to this part of the world. But surprisingly, the catchment that doesn't have any platypus population and may have not had a population for upwards of 20 or 30 years is actually the Bayside catchment south of the Brisbane River. So Hilliard's Creek, Ephrapa Creek, those sorts of areas. In the Redlands City Council area, there was no eDNA finds of platypus.
I've just had word there's time for one more question. Does anyone have a burning question? Because, you know, I'm good because we've had eDNA, nitrogen cycling. I'm very satisfied. They're areas that are very close to my heart, and we've talked about those, so I'm okay. But maybe others have other questions that they'd like to ask. We've heard about platypus as well. Other questions? Maybe maybe I can ask my question then. This is very exciting. So, it's for the panel, and it does follow on from a question that was asked about the growth and in offsets. Some of you in your presentations, all of you in fact, talk about innovation. And I wanted to ask you, just whoever would like to jump in, doesn't have to be all of you, but just whoever would like to jump in, what does it take? So you talk about taking things that have been done in the past and then kind of changing them, making them better, and then bring them out and unravelling them as something new. What does it take to make that happen? Maybe, Dennis, you would like to start.
Well, certainly from our point of view, where our emphasis is on restoration and vegetation restoration, the changing climate, whether it is climate change, but certainly over the last 10 years, we have not been able to reliably put plants in the ground as we did once. Predicting, you know, the old tradition of you stick it in September and then have to kill weeds from about December onwards and it grew just isn't there anymore. So these external forces that are making us change the way we do things and making us look at the problem in a very different way, be it from the methodology that we use, or the timing that we use, or even the species mix that we use to try and get some of those ecological services out of the areas that we're trying to revegetate. So stepping outside of what the norm and being brave enough to try new things in the face of what is often a lot of critique coming back in about, well, this is the way we do things, and having the opportunity to be able to do that is incredibly important.
I'm going to jump in there. Thanks, Ross. Yeah, I would echo that from Dennis. I think a little bit of space and a little bit of time and a little bit of collaboration go a really long way. So whilst we, many of our members, colleagues here on this panel are probably feeling a little haggard with what we've tried to get done over the last 12 months, I think making sure that we all cut out a small amount of time from our year to look at how we can do things better and then bring a small group of like minds together, or very different minds together, and go and kick the dirt and look at these things in real life and figure out how we can do this differently. The trap I fear for us all is to rest on our laurels of, you know, the way we've always done things for the last 20 years. And I think in that, if we keep attempting to do things that way, we will certainly fail. And there are many little innovations that we didn't get to talk about today that I guess a testament to the collaboration with many people in this room to try and do things a little better and a little more cost effectively.
And being prepared to fail and allowing ourselves that little opportunity to fail and learn.
No, I guess I could just add that looking at different ways that we engineer our hard and soft things together. So instead of blowing up mountains to throw rock in the river, we're looking at more woody debris and areas that are being cleared for development or infrastructure, using that debris in our solutions. So you get more fish-friendly, more creek-friendly, and better solutions that way, and how we apply those in conjunction with vegetation and giving it room to grow, as Dennis and Mark have alluded to.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Joel, did you want to?
I'll just quickly add, sorry, Joel.
Everyone wants to talk.
The process that we're using called co-design, which is a recognition that locally led place-based solutions belong to the community where we're seeing landscape changes, is something that drives us as an organisation every day. And I think recognising that the legacy is held by those communities and therefore they must be part of the solution, if not driving those solutions. And that really supports getting everyone around the table from that local community to share their values and their understanding of what that place means allows us to come up with a diversity of options and come together in a collective vision of what we want to achieve.
And I think that's actually worked really well for me, because the thing I was going to highlight from what everyone here has said is that the critical ingredient to empower that innovation and to realise that innovation is actually supportive leadership. Now, most of you here are probably leaders in your own spheres, but I can strongly say that as individuals, through Rod and the Science Committee, through the board, through Julie and our executive, their ability to inspire and support innovation, none of the innovation is possible without that. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to our leaders that support that. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Joel.
Once Joel's got the mic, thanks, Joel. I just actually want to jump up here and say how awesome is the team at Healthy Land and Water. Please put your hands together. Thanks, guys. I actually want to say that there's 7 here on the stage. There's another 7 behind each and every one of them. We're a team of 50 people, if that. That's on a good day. And we certainly take in interns. But nothing we do, yet you've only had a real snapshot of all the projects that we deliver in any one year. So I would encourage anyone to jump onto our website at hlw.org.au actually just to look at the enormity of the projects that we deliver in this region. For and behalf of every member of the public, for the environment, in respect of cultural heritage. And we don't do it without our partners. Many of you are in the room, and there's way many more out there as well.